to Lucille McQuaid from the Pro-Life Alliance. Isn't it fair to say that you are simply a pressure group? You're not a party with a variety of policies. So why should people vote for you in the second vote?
Well, we feel people should vote for us because perhaps in past elections they've agreed on a party but they haven't liked the particular views of a person. Now the electorate are given a chance to vote for someone with the same beliefs as them. We feel it's an ideal opportunity.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I just want to put to Donald Dewar, I know that you're very reluctant to even concede the idea that anybody should not put a tick in a Labour box. But answering the gentleman's question for the Green Party, a second preference, what would be your second preference?
Well, Kirsty, can I take this very seriously? Yes. Because I think that you are in danger of misleading people. It is not, it is, no, please, this is very, very important. This is not a second preference, a second choice after you've voted for your first choice. The first vote is to get your local parliamentarian into Holyrood. The second one is the vote which decides how many MSPs each party has in that parliament. It is in a sense of vote. It is in a sense of vote for, in fact, who holds the administration.
That's clear, though.
No, it's not clear when you use phrases like second preference. And let me say to you too, let me say to you too, Kirsty, that when I got my leaflet through from David McCletch's colleagues in my constituency saying don't vote in the second ballot for Labour, vote Conservative, because a Labour vote is a wasted vote. In 1997 election, if this system had been in place, we would have had 2 Labour MSPs on the list, in addition to what we got in the first past the post section. So it is absolutely key, because that is the link between the number of votes cast and the number of seats in the Parliament, and therefore if you wish a Labour government or an SNP government in that Parliament, or a Liberal or a yes,
very briefly
then you
to come
vote
straight to
twice for the party.
Be very brief, please. Very brief.
If anybody is in danger of spreading misinformation on this issue, it's you, Donald.
Very brief.
You've put out a pamphlet saying that a second vote for any other party cancels out your first vote for Labour. Now, in Lothian, that's absolutely not the case. Labour stands very little chance of gaining seats on the second ballot in Lothian, which is where we are tonight.
You've had a return on that speech. You've had a return on your question. We must move on now to a question from Doug Mont from the Scottish Labour Party.
Thanks very much. On the doorstep, the subject that's come up most often has been Kosovo. And I wonder why this particular subject, conflict in the Balkans, should be such a key factor in the Scottish general election. I wonder too whether Alex Salmond's remarks were a calculated risk or in fact a miscalculated blunder.
Thank you very much indeed. Alex Salmond.
Well, I made the remarks as a reply to the Prime Minister's statement, as a ministerial reply. That was almost 6 weeks ago now. 6 weeks on, where are we? We've got 800,000 Kosovo Albanians have been decanted in terror from their country. We have $4 billion have been spent on high explosives raining down in Kosovo and Serbia. We've got a situation where the estimates are that the cost of the war could run to $10 billion or more dollars. We've got perhaps thousands of Kosovo Albanians who've been slaughtered in Kosovo. We don't know how many people have been raped and subjected to other things. We've got that phrase collateral damage, which has fallen so far on buses, on trains, on television stations. You know, I just think we're entitled to ask 6 weeks on and come to a conclusion that the war hasn't gone very well thus far, and perhaps the tactics were misapplied and mistaken.
Right, in that case... In that case, in an independent Scotland, dominated by a nationalist agenda, Scottish air power or troops would not take part in any offensive in Kosovo. You'd be out of NATO anyway. You wouldn't even be part of it. What you're saying is you would have nothing to do with what is going on.
If it had been an SNP government in power in independent Scotland, we would not have taken part in the current action in the Balkans.
Thank you very
another
much
government
indeed.
may have taken a different position, but we would have taken part in it.
John, I want to put this to Donald Dewar. The gentleman asked how this became an issue in this election campaign, and of course it became an issue in this election campaign because you raised it. But on the other hand, Donald Dewar, Robin Cook came at the weekend talking in the Scottish election campaign, and he returned to the attack on Alex Salmond, which had been started. Alex Salmond had used the words unpardonable folly, which I think the gentleman was referring to. George Robertson had used the words toasted Belgrade. Tam DL called this attack by Robin Cook at the weekend as something which was attack beyond cheap. Shouldn't political leaders be entitled to voice an opinion which is different perhaps from the rest?
Of course they are. Of course they are, and I respect the sincerity. I think what surprised us, and surprised me certainly, was the use of phrases like unpardonable folly. I think this is a very difficult situation. There were clearly risks that had to be run. But I have to say that the ethnic cleansing, the appalling atrocities that were already being committed by the Milosevic regime in Kosovo, meant we couldn't just walk away from this. And I think that it is significant that right across NATO, from great powers like the United States through to small countries like Norway, there was a unanimity that we had to do something about it. And I know that Alex Salmond argues that we should just have had an economic blockade. The trouble about that is that that takes a long, long time.
So
And those
not people in the
unfortunate
audience.
people
Before I
didn't
come to the
have
other members of the panel, I would like to take 2 or 3 views in the audience. The lady first behind the gentleman with the check shirt, then the gentleman with the check shirt. The lady first behind you, please. The lady first behind you, please. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sana Sadullah, Civil Rights Campaign. I would like to put this question to the panel. Current refugee legislation represents a threat towards greater erosion of refugee rights. We have also witnessed a rise of racism incident in our society.
Could you stick to the point about Kosovo? Do you have a point on Kosovo?
I think Kosovo needs a lot more support than we have done so far.
The lady there with the microphone, yes. Your point, please, and then the gentleman with the check shirt. Yes.
Yeah, Slobodan Milosevic has shown clearly over the past few weeks that he's actually just playing with the NATO alliance, that for every advance he retreats, and for every retreat or stalemate he then advances again and pushes more refugees forward. What I'm concerned about is how much of a bill are we prepared to pay, especially since there doesn't seem to be any money around to repair Scotland's public sector houses.
Thank you very much. The gentleman with the check shirt, please.
I'd like to ask the panel what they think of NATO countries still exporting oil to Serbia while they're bombing Serbia itself. They've been bombing refineries. Why are they bombing refineries when they're still supplying Serbia with oil?
David McCletchy.
Well, I mean, I support the action that the government is taking in Kosovo in conjunction with our NATO allies. I think
even if it means ultimately complete ethnic cleansing.
No, it doesn't mean that it's there to stop ethnic cleansing. Milosevic had a carefully laid plan in place months ago and was embarked upon it. That's the facts of the matter. And I'm sorry, I don't want to play armchair generals here, but quite frankly, the kind of economic blockade idea that Alec came up with, and I don't doubt his integrity and belief that that was right, it just wouldn't have worked. And we've got to get the job finished in Kosovo and get these people back to their homeland in a safe and secure society where they can live in a degree of freedom. And let's finish the job and get behind our troops. I must say the Prime Minister as well.
I think that everybody in Europe agreed on the regard in which Slobodan Milosevic is held. But let's bring it back to the politics. Do you think this is being a political issue in this campaign, Jim Walls?
It has certainly been raised on doorsteps, and mostly raised by people who were disappointed and I think shocked with what Alec said. But Alec is entitled to his view. I've made the point on a number of occasions that I regret that unlike people like Tam Dalyell or Tony Benn, he didn't actually express that view on a number of occasions in the House of Commons before he went and made it on television. But let's be in no doubt. I mean, we could not just walk by on the other side. The outcry that would have come if that kind of ethnic cleansing had taken place and we had done nothing, it would have been deafening. And one further point, Kirsty, one further point. When Paddy Ashdown was out recently talking to the refugees, he asked them if they thought NATO's action had made matters worse, and they said no, they just wished NATO had acted earlier.
Alex Salmond, haven't you, by making this such a high-profile issue for the Nationalists, haven't you put someone like Margaret Ewing in difficulty, who's got both Kinloss and Lossiemouth in her constituency?
Well, I think you've got to say what you believe to be right.
Does she believe in your position?
Yes, she does. Can I say why I think the bombing campaign made matters worse for the Kosovo Albanians? The first thing that had to happen to start the bombing campaign was that 2,000 monitors from the United Nations and the Red Cross were withdrawn from Kosovo. These people were the only protection that the Kosovo Albanians had. It gave free rein to the Milosevic forces in Kosovo. Before I came out this evening, I watched Channel 4 News, They were doing a report from Washington.
Very briefly.
The news is that Clinton is going to cut a deal with Milosevic. After 6 weeks of bombing, there's going to be a deal done. The Kosovo Albanians are going to get much, much less than they deserve, and Milosevic is going to get much, much more than he deserves. I think the bombing campaign has been counterproductive and a grave mistake.
We must move on now and take a question from Kate Lothian, who's a Liberal Democrat. Your question, please.
Good evening. Can I ask the panel members, please, what they would do to equalise the petrol prices to be more in line with other countries and to stop the constant punishment that happens to motorists? After all, cars are here to stay.
Thank you very much. Donald, as we have travelled around the country doing hustings programmes from here to Hollywood, we're being constantly faced with real anger about the cost of fuel.
Yes. I understand that it's unpopular. I have to say it's part of our overall strategy to try and cut CO2 emissions. And people do try and take the global warming problems seriously, the problems of climate change, and we're attacking this in a whole number of ways. Can I say one of the things I do slightly object to is the hypocrisy. If I could just say, for example, David McCletch's party, in fact, introduced this in 1993, put it up to 5% very shortly afterwards, and ran it right the way through. Yeah. Alex Salmond's economics of independence are based in part on the fact that it will continue because he's put the revenue from it into his calculations and indeed has overestimated it. And let me finish. The official position of the Liberal Democrats, as expressed during the recent budget debates and in their last conference, is that 6% is all right, but they want 8%.
Right. Well, we'll come back to you, but I want you to pick up exactly what Donald Dewar was saying. It's your policy. You started the escalator going.
And the point about an escalator, Kirsty, is that when you get to the top, you get off. That's the whole point about an escalator. No, you're the one that's accelerating it, and Gordon Brown's accelerating. That's your party's policy, Jim. That's Labour's policy as well. Now, we have got to the stage where our fuel prices are the highest in Europe. We have done our bit on CO2 emissions. It's time to get off and stop this increase on our private motorists, 50 pence a gallon under Labour, costs on the haulage industry that are going to be reflected on the supermarket shelf on the goods going to market.
Just be quite clear, Jim Walsh, what is the Liberal Democrat policy? Because in fact, after this was announced, Matthew Taylor, of course, is 6% over inflation for the fuel tax. Matthew Taylor said it actually should be 8%, not 6%. And here you are campaigning for it to reduce in Scotland. Is this pure devolution?
Well, I think it's actually an important point to make. It's actually a reserve power. When Alec goes around telling people vote SNP on Thursday and they'll get lower fuel tax, then it just won't happen. But we've got a package of environmental. We've got a package of environmental measures, which is part. Yes, there is an escalator, but there is also, and we've made this clear on many occasions, why we voted against both David's party's increases in fuel tax and Donald's party's increase in fuel tax. It must go hand in hand with measures that will protect rural...
Well, we do say it. Before I bring in Alex Salmond, I have got to bring in Marion Coyne from the Green Party. No, I must bring in Marion Coyne at this point from the Green Party.
Policy, and I think I'm allowed to explain.
Well, let Marion Coyne have a quick word here, please.
Thank you. Well, the first thing to say, of course, is we should never have lost our wonderful railway network that we had. That's what forced a lot of vehicle transport onto the roads and what are polluting our cities and countryside. In the long run, we know we cannot just keep relying on road vehicle transport. We know that it's unsustainable. Until then, though, we do have to rely on it until we get a good and integrated public transport system reinstated in Scotland. We want to see differentials so that people who need to use their cars, like people in the rural areas, don't face the same penalty as those who have other choices available to them.
Thank you very much. Surely, though, Alex Salmond, I need to bring out Alex Salmond to time out. Alex Salmond, surely anything that's good for the environment in Scotland is something that you should support, and so therefore you should support a reduction immediately.
Yes, I mean, everybody wants to put forward policies that are good for the environment, but we have the highest petrol and diesel prices in the whole of Europe. I mean, everybody else has signed up to the CO2 agreements as well. And I think at the heart of this is not an environmental policy. It's a tax policy. I don't think it's green. I think it's brown. Now, Donald said Donald said what was wrong with everybody else's policy. He didn't spend much time defending the Labour Party's policy. That Labour Party policy, Donald, is costing thousands of jobs potentially in Scotland. It's increasing the price of every good in every shop, the length and breadth of the country. It's deeply unfair to rural motorists. People have got no alternatives in public transport, and it's making our industry uncompetitive. Little wonder Donald didn't spend much time defending that policy.
Donald here. Doesn't this show the weakness of devolution, that actually you're powerless to effect to change this? This is a Treasury matter.
No, devolution is a division of responsibilities, I think well worked out, logical and strong, and I hope enduring. What we are doing is having the courage of everyone else's convictions of a few years ago. And I may say that for Jim, with all respect, to say that he's got a package, he doesn't go around saying part of the package is an 8% escalator. Now, on this, of course, we're
but you still have to go cap in hand to the Chancellor to ask for a reduction. No, I'm not going cap in hands at all. We are fully represented in the Westminster Parliament, and this is part of the settlement that makes sense. But can I say...
Did you oppose it in Cabinet?
Can I say to Alex Salmond that, of course, we're introducing all sorts of other measures, like the climate change levy, which will be tackling the same problem.
But did you oppose it in Cabinet?
Well, Kirsty, you're joking, aren't you? I mean, in the sense that Cabinet, if I start telling you what happens in the Cabinet room, then we're making a total
they will know about
of the
politics.
Just as much. Did you oppose it in Cabinet?
No. I mean, if I asked Alex Salmond about the arguments in his own party...
we can't ask questions backwards and forwards. The simple question is that you say that you're fully represented at Westminster. This is a Westminster matter. Nobody in the Scottish Parliament has the power to change, stop, or slow down the escalator.
Well, the point about it is that is a reserve power. Yes. But it makes sense, because if we go for independence, look at the thousands of jobs that we lost.
I'm afraid Donald Dewar, I'm afraid, gentlemen, at this point we have to close down the debate. That is all from Mcewan Hall in Edinburgh. Thank you to the audience and to our four party leaders. So remember to use your vote on Thursday. In this election, more than any other, every single vote counts. Then on Thursday night, sit back and watch BBC's election coverage. I'll be on air from 10 o'clock on BBC One, the channel which will be first to bring you the thrills and spills and the big story of Thursday's historic election for the Scottish Parliament. From all of us here in Edinburgh, a very good night.
And Radio Scotland's on the campaign trail with Colin Mackay, and tomorrow afternoon they reach Journey's End in Edinburgh, where they'll quiz the local candidates about the burning local issues. That's the final hustings 99 tomorrow at 1 on Radio Scotland.
My plan is to sell sports socks.
Just sports socks?
I'll be sticking pretty exclusively to the sports socks, yes.
You have a premises in mind?
Argyle Street in Glasgow.
Your business strategy?
Sports socks. Yeah, your sports socks. £2 for £1 now. £2 for £1 now.
If I could just offer you a wee bit of advice concerning diversifying your product list.
What's that?
Tune the Fat.
Gas lighters.
Thursday at 9:30, BBC One Scotland.
Now on BBC One Scotland, 999 with Michael Burke.